Those at the back, if you'd like to come and get your seats, that would be brilliant. I appreciate that a few in the room might be fading a little bit at this point in the day, so I'd love to engage you all in a quick survey, for which I need you all back at your seats, please. Thank you very much. So, if you can bear with me, could you all stand up for me, please? That would be brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, that's everybody. Stand up, please. It's good. It gets your blood moving. It's great. So, thank you. Yeah, it's great. It'll be great. So, you get to sit down if you could describe the vision of your university or your organization in one short sentence, then you get to sit down. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, but don't be getting too smug. Those of you that have sat down, well done, but don't feel too smug. Everyone back up, please. This is the second and final question of my survey, I promise. Everyone back up. So this time, you get to sit down if you think that leadership, or good leadership, will be the primary driver of the future success of your university or organization. You get to sit down. Okay, the rest of you won't enjoy this talk, so you can all go. That's fine. No, I'm kidding. Thank you very much. So I'm just here really to introduce our next speaker. I would like to add my thanks and strong support to the Times Hire for today's event. Absolute brilliant foresight and ambition to hold the first Global Young Universities Summit. Fantastic. A recognition of the outstanding contribution that these universities make to our economy and our society. As Professor Wendy Purcell said earlier, it's not about being old, it's about being bold. A sentiment that many of our students would wholeheartedly agree with, I suspect, and good on them. So I have the privilege of introducing Dr. David Daniel, President of the University of Texas at Dallas, who will be speaking about leadership challenges for young universities, creating a vision, rallying staff, and making choices. As we've been hearing about today, this is a really exciting time for higher education around the globe. As the economy and the way we work and interact with and create knowledge changes so rapidly, it's going to be critical for higher education to be at the heart of driving that change and making that change happen. This is where young universities have a particularly important role to play, as we've been hearing about today. The best of the young universities are bold, ambitious institutions that are future-focused. They're more able to respond to changes and innovate in a dynamic and rapid way to challenge the status quo and challenge the market. This is certainly the experience of the 22 University Alliance institutions that I work with as Chief Executive of the University Alliance. These are 22 world-class global universities of advanced technology, design, and the professions. University Alliance institutions span right across the UK, although it is a tiny country, of course, so that's probably a bit easier than it otherwise might be. These include the Plymouth University, Huddersfield University, and Oxford Brookes University, all of whom you've heard from or about today. These are 22 outstanding young universities, and between them, they boast over 250 research centres that undertake world-leading research, all focused on the needs of industry, society, and solving real-world problems. We educate over a quarter of all UK undergrad and postgrad students in the UK. That's over 500,000 students globally studying at Alliance University at any one time. We have some of the highest employment records, including graduate startups and entrepreneurs that will again help to change and drive change in our world. We're hugely proud of our graduates. Many of the Alliance institutions actually started their journey way back in the mid-1800s during the time of Industrial Revolution as institutes of engineering and design in growing and ambitious cities across the UK, responding to the changing needs of the economy and society around them at that time. Well, responsiveness remains absolutely critical and a part of their DNA today. And while they are relatively young as universities, they've been in the business of driving change, nurturing talent, and solving real-world problems for many decades. In a similar way, the University of Texas at Dallas was founded out of real industrial need for graduates with advanced training in engineering and physical sciences. These young, ambitious universities of advanced technology are playing a major role in the US and the UK and right across the globe, putting them at the heart of the changing economy and new industries. The opportunities for these universities are huge, but the challenges are equally as great. Getting the vision and the leadership right is absolutely critical to the future success of these universities. This is where I'm delighted to be able to hand over to Dr. David Daniels to talk about his experience of how leaders of your universities can create vision, rally staff, and make choices. Dr. Daniel is the 4th president of the University of Texas at Dallas. He received his bachelor's, master's, and PhD in engineering from the University of Texas at Austin and served on the faculty there until '96. He was appointed president of the University of Texas of Dallas in 2005. During his presidency, UT Dallas has tripled its research expenditures, initiated or completed $600 million of construction on new buildings and infrastructure, added 40 new degree programs, and raised more than $240 million of private funding. UT Dallas has grown to 20,000 students whilst maintaining among the highest average entering SAT scores of any Texas public college or university. Dr. Daniel has advocated widely for developing and cultivating world-class research universities and for UT Dallas to become one of the nation's top research universities. His work has led to 2 legislative initiatives that pumped more than $500 million of state funding into this effort and led him to being named a finalist for Texan of the Year by the Dallas Morning News, something we'd all love to hold as a title, I'm sure. He knows something of vision and leadership, and therefore I'm really privileged to hand over to Dr. David Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very kind. Thank you. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's wonderful to be here with you. It's wonderful to have the president of our sister institution, the University of Texas at San Antonio here, Dr. Ricardo Romo. Of course, San Antonio is famous in Texas for the Alamo. And with such an international audience, I'm trying to figure out what we're famous for. For the older generation, it's undoubtedly J.R. Ewing. For the younger generation and basketball fan, perhaps Dirk Nowitzki of the Dallas Mavericks. At any rate, what I think I will do is spend just a few minutes talking about some historical events in the life of the university that turned out to have a profound effect, some unintended, and sort of tell the story of the university through these historic events. For me, it's particularly interesting because I spent my entire career at large, very, very research-intensive universities, UT Austin and the University of Illinois. So this was the first time I came to one of these upstart universities, like so many other leaders, I think, who are here today, and what great fun it has been. Let me see if I can pull up. Can we pull up the first slide, please? There we go. Now I hit forward, and there you have it. We were founded in 1969, so unfortunately we're going to roll off the list of the top 50, but that's okay. I've learned not to feel badly about that today. We're part of the University of Texas system, which has 9 academic institutions and 6 health institutions. We have a little over 21,000 students, but some of those are part-time students. So the real number I look at is our full-time equivalent students, which is 17,000 students. I'm often asked how large do we want to get before we stop, and the answer is about 25,000 full-time equivalent students, and here's how I arrive at that number. We want to compete with the best U.S. public research universities, and 5 of the top 10 ranked public universities in America are relatively small. They are the University of Virginia, University of North Carolina, Georgia Tech, University of California at San Diego, and University of California at Santa Barbara. They average 25,000 full-time equivalent students, so we're not trying to get larger strictly for the purpose of being larger, but we want to be competitive. And with a chemistry department that's half the size of those chemistry departments, we simply can't offer the range of courses and the range of opportunities, particularly for graduate students. So scale does matter to us, but not for the sake of scale, for the sake of competitiveness. More than 80% of all of our degrees are awarded in science, engineering, and business. We have an unusually high percentage for a public university of graduate students, about 40%. Typically, at most U.S. public universities, it's about half that fraction. Strong emphasis on research. We are not one of the big-time athletic programs. We are a national powerhouse in chess, however. There you go. Let me start now with sort of 10 key points about the history of the university. We were founded by the same gentleman who founded Texas Instruments. These were mostly MIT-educated people. And in fact, this is a picture from the November 1964 issue of the Texas Instruments corporate newspaper. They actually created a research institute before we morphed into a university. Their goal was to build the MIT of the Southwest. When I first came to UT Dallas, I didn't pay much attention to that. Obviously, we're not MIT, but I have found it extremely advantageous to repeat that phrase over and over and over again because the ordinary layperson gets it. All I have to do is say MIT of the Southwest and they understand. I don't have to explain what STEM is or science and technology. The dumbest state legislator gets that, and they actually don't have any problem with it. It just turns out to be that very convenient answer to the first question, be seated if you can say in one line what your goal is. So that turned out to be quite nice. One of the remarkable stories about the university is how over a period of 45 years we avoided mission creep. And I've thought about that, and I think fundamentally the founders got it right. Their goal was to create a university that would supply superb scientists and engineers, and they did so in a city that not only can support, but urgently needs such a university. The Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is the fourth most economically productive city in America. Here's a quiz for our international visitors to wake you up. Name the three most economically productive cities in America. Come on. New York? Not Boston. Not Dallas. We're number 4. Los Angeles, Chicago, then Dallas-Fort Worth is the fourth. And we're also tied with Houston, essentially, as the fourth largest city. It's a huge city for delivering technology jobs. I'm told that only Silicon Valley in America has more technology workers than Dallas-Fort Worth. And Dallas-Fort Worth does not have a top-tier academic research university. And if one uses membership in the Association of American Universities, or AAU, as the club of elite research universities, I can tell you that Dallas-Fort Worth is the only one of the 15 most economically productive cities in America without an AAU university. This city needs us to fulfill the vision. Furthermore, we have a great sister institution in Dallas, UT Southwestern Medical Center of Dallas Medical School, 5 Nobel laureates on staff, all of whom won their Nobel Prizes for work done at that institution. And I think having the ability to partner with a powerhouse of a medical school, in my opinion, is absolutely critical because so much of the innovation and discovery to occur will occur in those fields. The sort of mantra I use that seems to work pretty well for us is we tackle globally significant problems of great interest to local employers. Because we have such a mass of local employers interested in these areas, my feeling is that the only way we're going to get the resources we need to get to where we want to be is to earn those dollars from the local community, philanthropic community, businesses, and so forth. So we stay true to that mission. I will tell you, for example, that we have no ambition to start a nursing school. Not that the world doesn't need more nursing schools, but it just doesn't connect to the research mission as well as some other fields we might start, like pharmacological sciences or toxicology or other fields. So we say to the state legislature, if you want more nurses, put the money in existing universities with the nursing programs and expand them. And to tell you the truth, there's nothing more hardly that a legislature likes to hear, other than that you're going to vote for them, than staying within your mission and not trying to be all things to all people. So, another example, we are investing heavily in the biomedical field, but Dallas is not a pharmaceutical headquarters in the U.S. There's essentially no pharma business, or innovation at least, in Dallas-Fort Worth. So we've chosen medical electronics as our niche in the biomedical field because there's a huge electronics and telecommunications industry in Dallas-Fort Worth. Dallas-Fort Worth is a telecom hub of North America. AT&T is headquartered there. Ericsson has its North American headquarters there. So in other words, among all the problems we might choose to focus on, we pick the ones that make the sense for our region because we're so lucky to be in such a vibrant city. Well, in 1969, we were gifted by those same founders to the University of Texas system, and that's when the clock started running on our being eligible to be considered by this organization. The initial foci, as you see on the slide, were in the sciences, and the first faculty we hired were in those science areas. This turned out to be very helpful as well, because later we would invest in more applied research and technology commercialization, but our early roots were in pure science, and this has helped us maintain a culture with a healthy mix of basic fundamental research and applied research as well. We were initially restricted to graduate education because the other universities in the area did not want the competition. In order to gain their silence, we said we'll just focus on graduate studies, and they didn't really care if we were doing PhD work in space sciences and computer science at the time. They said, fine, go do it, because they weren't in that business. The Dallas business community, of course, liked what we were doing, and we stayed focused on those subjects. We were authorized by the legislature of Texas to admit undergraduate students, but only junior and senior transfer students in 1976 by the overwhelming vote of confidence of 16 to 15 by the Texas Senate. Other universities in the area did not want us to admit any students at all. And fundamentally, that restriction to junior and senior students was to placate the other universities, including the community colleges, which only educated freshmen and sophomores. Basically, so long as we didn't touch their pool of student applicants, they didn't really care. The Dallas business community, though, was desperate for more students graduating in these areas of foci, and probably they were responsible for the 16 votes that ultimately carried the day. And so the very first undergraduate students we recruited were only those students with the type of academic credentials that would naturally enable them to matriculate to graduate programs. The fourth in my list of 10 is that we were allowed to start an engineering school in 1986. This was a huge battle for us. The other universities did care about this and did not want the competition. So they pressured the state education agency, and the state education agency finally said, well, okay, you can start an engineering program, but you can't use a dime of state money. You have to go raise all the money to start the program through private funds. So certain companies, such as Raytheon and Texas Instruments, went out and raised about $15 million, I think much to the shock and dismay of our detractors. And indeed, we were able to start the program only because of the strong support of the private sector. So we have a culture today of working really, really well with these companies. It started from the very beginning. We have some great senior design projects in our engineering school, maybe one of the best programs in the country. We have a rich program of summer internships for our students, which is great for them to get practical experience. And the School of Engineering is still growing. A real battle, a serious battle occurred that was probably the most significant one in 1990. At this time, and this was long before I came to the university officials wanted to make UT Dallas a complete university by bringing freshmen in to add to the transfer students and the masters and the PhDs. Again, area universities were opposed, really opposed this time, because we were treading on their turf, including on the turf of the community colleges. So a compromise was struck to enable the legislation to go forward. And the two key points of the compromise are shown in the middle of the slide. The law literally said that we could admit freshmen provided the quality of the freshman class was no less than that of the University of Texas at Austin, the state's flagship institution. I know our detractors put that in to kill us, figuring we'd never be able to do that. And so what we did, at that time, we had about 7,000 students, mostly graduate students. We went to the local area high schools, found 100 students, gave them all complete scholarship, paid for their housing, paid for their books, paid for their meal. Why else would they come to our university? But indeed, they had entrance exam scores higher than UT Austin as required by law. In effect, we bought a really high-quality freshman class. And we continued with a very aggressive merit-based scholarship program, which continues today, by the way. And indeed, this law was repealed in 2005, but we still live with it in spirit. The second thing that happened, again, in order to placate the local detractors, was the law said that we could not offer any academic program that would adversely affect any other program in the area. So what it forced us to do was be highly collaborative and work at the boundaries between disciplines. And one of the examples I'll point out in a minute is the Art and Technology program, which is a program at the intersection of the visual arts and computer science. But degree program after degree program in software engineering, in neurosciences, in all sorts of fields were carved out of sort of the boundaries. In essence, the law told us we had to be interdisciplinary before it was in vogue to be interdisciplinary. So today we have very few schools with departments. Most of them don't have departments. When I first came to the university and walked the halls and said to faculty who could be anywhere, "Why are you here?" the most common answer was because this place has no boundaries. People work together here. They actually like each other here. And I think it all came about culturally because it was forced upon us. And it's for that reason that I say this might have been the best thing that ever happened to us. And we also find a great number of students with double majors, with minors, because this whole culture was set to work at the boundaries between the disciplines. The sixth major thing to happen was a wonderful, wonderful gift from a woman named Margaret McDermott. She's the woman in the wheelchair in the bottom of the slide. She's 102 years old and sharp as a tack. She's the widow, by the way, of one of those three founders. Eugene McDermott was one of the founders of Texas Instruments and of UT Dallas. But this gift is probably the most powerful undergraduate scholarship program I've ever seen. You get a full scholarship, full tuition, all that. You get a study abroad experience for a semester. You get to go meet with the director of the Dallas Opera privately. You go to the rehearsals of the symphony. Margaret makes sure the students are very well taken care of. Her daughter is the woman sitting on the stairs to the left of her, the woman in the wheelchair. That's Mary McDermott Cook. And our provost is the gentleman to Margaret's right. One of the things this program does is every year we bring in 250 of the high school counselors advising high school graduates going to college to our campus, and we pick the 250 best high schools from across the country. I remember sitting next at lunch to the high school counselor for the most exclusive private high school in Beverly Hills, California. And so we use this as a way to market the university to the best and brightest throughout the country. And by the way, it sort of raised the bar for the whole institution. I think it had a profound effect, well beyond probably what had been envisioned. Texas Instruments in the early 2000s was considering where to build its next multi-billion-dollar fabrication facility, and it used its leverage to the benefit of UT Dallas and created a project called Emmett, and I don't need to tell you why it's called that, which was a $300 million investment in UT Dallas. This was just before I came to UT Dallas, and I remember remarking at the time, that's a serious deal. Even Stanford would call that a serious deal. $300 million to build a new building, hire new faculty, essentially with a goal of elevating the status of the engineering school. They put some real money behind it, and it did indeed have a very seriously positive effect. We had a really ugly campus. It was built in the early 1960s on a budget at a time, people call it brutalist architecture in the U.S., exposed aggregate concrete. The lower left corner of this slide is typically what the campus looked like. We could not become a truly world-class university with that kind of look. So we convinced a lead donor and some others to give us now over $40 million, actually it's up to about $50 million now, in private gifts to landscape the campus. We went out and hired a very renowned landscape architect, Peter Walker. He's the landscape architect of record for the World Trade Center Memorial in New York City. I won't tell you what his fee was, but it was big, like his set of credentials. And we just utterly transformed the campus. I'll never forget an older faculty member coming up to me at the dedication ceremony and said, President Daniel, I've been here for 25 years, and this is the first time I felt that I was at a real college campus. It now had the look and the feel. And I think the lesson here is never underestimate the aesthetics, and I'm so impressed by those international universities that start out with beautiful buildings, because we started out with really ugly buildings and had to make some correction. We were fortunate enough to convince the state to pour significant money into creating more great research universities. And in fact, UT San Antonio, UT Dallas, and 5 others are eligible for these dollars. I happen to have written a white paper and garnered support from other university presidents and legislators. We got newspapers to back it, and in fact, one of the really great things that happened about this conversation about great research universities is a lot of Texans didn't realize how important research universities are. Innovation, creativity, the economy, avoiding brain drain. It just turned out to be a great conversation. So it certainly poured money in. The key one in my mind was that matching gifts program. It's a $30 million a year matching gifts program. So if I can go raise $5 million for endowed faculty chairs, I'll get that matched with $5 million of state money. But the other 6 universities are eligible for it too. So we're in competition with the other universities. And when this program was first launched, one of our wonderful supporters and I were on the phone, and she said to me, "David, we've got to win this, don't we?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I'm going to write you a check for actually she was going to gift a stock for $7.2 million. Is there any hurry to get it to you?" And I said, "The matching funds are given out until they run out in the order in which the funds are deposited in the bank." And she says to me, "I'll have the attorney wire the stock today." So it's a great program, and it gets donors to get out their checkbook. But our fundamental premise is there's not enough money in the state of Texas government's budget, nor in the federal government, to do this. Without private money, my feeling is it just can't be done. So it's had a very, very positive impact. Finally, number 10 on my list, we are a member of the University of Texas system. They have a $16 billion, that's with a B, US dollar endowment from oil-producing lands. By the way, that land was given to the University of Texas system a century ago. At the time, they hardly wanted to accept it because it was thought to be worthless. Well, it turned out to have oil on it years later and to be anything less than worthless. The unique thing is our Board of Trustees, our governing board, has complete control over the expenditure of that money. Not the government, not me, but our governing board. And so we actually are able to build buildings off of that. What they actually do is borrow money and then repay the borrowed money from the proceeds from the endowment. So we just recently got $72 million for a new engineering building. The ability to actually construct buildings off of this fund is absolutely critical to our business plan. We are a science, engineering, and business university, but we do pay attention to the arts, and I want to take just a moment to talk about that. We've done so strategically. Our Dean of Arts, Dennis Kratz, Arts and Humanities actually, in my view, is one of the most brilliant art deans in America because he's figured out a way to make the arts thrive at what is fundamentally a science, engineering, and business university. So Dr. Rick Bertel used to be head of the Dallas Museum of Art. He's a world-famous art historian. One of our strategies is partner with the great arts community in our city. Don't try to go it alone. Pony up and partner with, make connections with the great art communities in the city. Turns out that music is important. Even scientists and engineers really enjoy music, and we cannot attract and retain exceptional talent without a music program. So we've chosen to invest in music for that reason. Upper right corner, emerging media and communications, our dean was pressured to start a journalism program. He said, "Nothing doing, but I'll start an emerging media and communications program because that's more consistent with the flavor and mission of the university." In terms of languages, we focused on languages that are of greatest interest for technology companies. So we were the first Texas university to have a Confucius Institute. I joke that we'll never teach Italian at our university, which is unfortunate because I love Italy, have many friends there. But I think China, Korea, and languages like that will continue to be our focus. And we've made a huge investment in art and technology because that's how we think we can differentiate ourselves. Well, let me wrap this up quickly. The result today is, at least according to U.S. News and World Report, we're the number 3 ranked public university in America, and you can see how much younger we are than the others. Kiplinger's publishes a best value list, which is a sort of a combination of high student quality, high graduation rate, high sort of positive impact relative to the cost of the university. And what I enjoy so much about this, notice UC Irvine is another one of those under 50 schools, but all other 9 universities are members of the AAU, the Club of the Great Research Universities, so we're thrilled to even be on the list. The left graph is just our enrollment. We're growing at about 7% per year. We're probably a little under a decade away from reaching our goal, and as you can see, research expenditures are tracking. I mentioned earlier that we have not lost our focus. The left-hand part of this slide is a list of the top 10 majors selected by our freshmen. Biology, computer science, biomedical engineering, neuroscience, arts and technology, mechanical engineering, biochemistry, electrical engineering, business administration, and computer engineering. Great, great majors for our students, great majors for employers in the area. The SAT and ACT are high school entrance tests, and we actually, in math and verbal, are the highest in the state of Texas, so we've managed to stay true to that. This is my last slide, just quickly, key challenges for the next several years. My number one problem is maintaining quality while growing 7% per year. Quality is everything to us, and that's easier said than done. Somehow, though, we just have a culture. Maybe that goes back to our entrepreneurial days of getting that done. And maybe my biggest fear is that as we mature into one of these great research universities, we'll be just like the others. And I think somehow we don't want to do that. All the wonderful characteristics of the 45-year-old university that differentiated us and got us to this point are things we need to treasure and keep, even though, at least by some measures, we're going to be looking like the rest. Paying for new academic buildings, so long as the oil keeps flowing and the Board of Regents likes us, I'm actually not worried about that, except for as long as the oil keeps flowing and the Board of Regents likes us. Managing state funding that lags enrollment. In Texas, the state funding is based on your enrollment from a year or 2 prior. And so as you're growing, you're not actually getting paid by the state for your current enrollment. You're getting paid for what it was in the past. And with the kind of growth that we've had, that means millions and millions of dollars not come into the institution at any one time, which leads me to want to raise tuition, which is a very, very sensitive issue at our university. And by the way, one sort of side note here. Remember I said the first undergraduates were junior and senior transfer students? We've got great relations with community colleges, and they tend to be dramatically less expensive than coming in as a freshman and staying 4 years. So our sort of approach toward access is to send people to the community colleges where they can save several tens of thousands of dollars. It's already inculcated in our culture, works great, and we want to keep doing that. Thank you so much for your attention, ladies and gentlemen, and if we have just a moment for questions, I'll be more than delighted to try to deflect your question or otherwise avoid answering it, as university presidents have come to learn to do. Thank you.
We do have a brief window for questions. I wonder whether I could ask, as chair, how long do you think it'll be before people are saying that MIT is the UT Dallas of the East?
Well, I'll say this because I know we have some folks from Israel here. I remember meeting with the president of Technion University, and I told him that, and he laughed and said, yes, they say the same thing about Technion, the MIT of Israel, but we like to think of MIT as the Technion of America. So I don't know how long that will be, and I don't think it will ever happen in a sense. We're not MIT. They're a private university. But I do think we're probably a decade away from being a seriously competitive research university, sort of in the game to get an invitation to the AAU. Typically with the AAU, you need to be fully qualified for at least a decade before the invitation is issued. But you know, one of the things I try to do that is a permanent fixture in everything is we don't start anything unless we can sustain it. And we always build for the long term. With the private giving, for example, one of the questions is, do we spend it or do we put it in endowment? So we have just received, but not yet announced, an extremely large gift for graduate fellowships. We're going to put that all in endowment, as tempting as it might be to go grab the best graduate students now so we can rise in your rankings 2 years from now. Our strategy is to build it to last. So it's brick by brick. What is it some people say? You fill a bucket drop by drop with water. Unfortunately, you can poke a hole in the bucket and empty it much faster. But we're filling the bucket drop by drop.
Thank you. Any more? I think we're nearing the end of a long day, but thank you for injecting
so much
energy into the session.